She pointed at the inflatable pool in my yard with a smile that promised trouble. "That's a violation," Karen announced, clipboard in hand. But when the HOA inspector arrived to shut me down, he noticed something strange behind her fence, something that made his jaw drop. What he discovered hidden in her backyard didn't just expose her lies. It brought the entire neighborhood to her front door, demanding answers she couldn't give. The doorbell rang at 8:47 a.m. on a Saturday morning, which was Maya Rodriguez's first clue that something was about to go sideways. She'd been up since 6, making pancakes shaped like dinosaurs for her 4-year-old son, Elijah, whose squeals of laughter echoed through their modest 3-bedroom home in the Willowbrook Heights subdivision. Her husband, Marcus, had already left for his shift at the hospital. 12 hours in the ER meant she was flying solo today, and she'd planned a quiet morning in the backyard with Eli's new birthday present. The inflatable pool. 6 feet in diameter, bright blue with yellow fish printed on the sides, filled with exactly 18 inches of water that Eli had already splashed in twice since breakfast. Maya could see it through the kitchen window now, sitting on the grass beside the wooden playset Marcus had assembled last summer. She wasn't prepared for Karen Whitmore standing on her doorstep. "Good morning, Maya," Karen said, though her tone suggested it was anything but good. She wore white capri pants and a coral blouse that probably cost more than Maya's car payment, her blonde hair pulled into a sleek ponytail that didn't move in the breeze. She held a leather-bound portfolio against her chest like a shield. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Just breakfast," Maya said slowly, not opening the storm door. "What can I do for you, Karen?" They'd lived across the street from each other for 3 years, ever since Maya and Marcus had scraped together enough for the down payment on this house. Karen had been the first to welcome them to the neighborhood, if welcome meant showing up with a bottle of cheap wine and a list of HOA rules printed on cream-colored cardstock. Since then, their interactions had been minimal and carefully polite. Karen chaired the HOA board. Maya attended exactly 0 meetings and paid her dues on time to avoid attention. "I was walking Precious this morning," Karen said, referencing the white Pomeranian that barked at everything with a pulse. "And I couldn't help but notice you've installed a pool in your backyard." Maya felt her jaw tighten. "It's an inflatable kiddie pool for my son." "Yes, well," Karen opened her portfolio and extracted a document with the efficiency of a process server. "According to Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the Willowbrook Heights Homeowners Association bylaws, any water feature exceeding 3 feet in diameter requires written approval from the Architectural Review Committee at least 30 days prior to installation." "You're joking." "I assure you I'm not." Karen held out the paper, her smile thin and practiced. "You'll need to remove it immediately, or the HOA will be forced to fine you $100 per day until compliance is achieved." Maya stared at the woman on her porch, trying to process what she was hearing. Behind her, Elijah ran through the living room making airplane noises, his t-shirt already soaked from the pool. "It's a $20 inflatable pool from Target," Maya said, her voice deliberately calm. "My 4-year-old plays in it for an hour after breakfast. There's no filtration system, no electrical components, no permanent installation. It's basically a large bucket." "The bylaws don't specify permanent versus temporary," Karen replied. "They specify diameter. Your pool is clearly over 3 feet. "Then the bylaws are insane." "Nevertheless, they're the bylaws you agreed to when you purchased your home." Karen tucked the portfolio under her arm. "I'm sorry, Maya, but rules are rules. We have to maintain standards in this community or property values suffer. I'm sure you understand." Maya understood plenty. She understood that Karen's own backyard was surrounded by an 8-foot privacy fence, the maximum allowed under the bylaws, conveniently. She understood that Karen had filed complaints against 3 other families in the past year for minor infractions. Mrs. Chen for her vegetable garden being visually unattractive, the Johnsons for parking their work van on the street overnight, and the Patels for having the wrong shade of beige on their mailbox post. "I'll take it under advisement," Maya said, starting to close the door. "That's not advisement territory," Karen said sharply. "That's a direct order from the HOA board. 24 hours, Maya. After that, the fines begin." Maya closed the door without another word and leaned against it, her heart pounding with an anger she rarely let herself feel. Through the window, she watched Karen cross the street back to her house, the largest in the neighborhood, a sprawling two-story colonial with professionally landscaped beds and a fountain in the front yard that definitely exceeded 3 feet in diameter. "Mommy, can we swim now?" Elijah appeared at her side, his face hopeful and innocent. Maya looked down at her son, at his gap-toothed smile, and the way his curls were still damp from his last pool session. She thought about Marcus, who'd picked up extra shifts for 3 months to afford the small birthday party they'd thrown last weekend. She thought about the pure joy on Eli's face when he'd torn open the wrapping paper and seen the pool box. "Yeah, baby," she said quietly, "we can swim." She helped him into his water shoes and watched from the patio as he jumped into the shallow water, splashing and laughing like the world was nothing but sunshine and possibilities. Maya pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number for Richard Chen, Mrs. Chen's husband, who'd warned her months ago that Karen was on a power trip that would make a mall cop jealous. "Richard, it's Maya Rodriguez. I need to know who the HOA inspector is for our district." "Why?" Richard's voice carried the weariness of someone who'd fought this battle before. "What did Karen do now?" "She's threatening to fine me $100 a day for Eli's kiddie pool." The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds too long. "You're serious?" Richard finally said. "Dead serious. She showed up at my door with the bylaws printed out and everything." "That woman," Richard exhaled hard. "The inspector's name is Tom Bradshaw. He's actually reasonable, believe it or not. Works for the city, handles code enforcement and HOA compliance. I've got his number somewhere, hold on." Maya waited, watching Elijah practice his swimming by kicking his legs and going exactly nowhere. She was already mentally calculating how much $100 a day would cost them if this escalated. Their savings account could handle maybe a week before they'd have to start making impossible choices. "Got it," Richard said, rattling off the number. "But Maya, be prepared for Karen to double down. She doesn't back down once she's started something. It's like a sickness with her." "Yeah, well, I've got a sickness too," Maya said. "It's called protecting my kids' happiness." She called Tom Bradshaw immediately. He answered on the third ring, his voice professional but not unfriendly. "Bradshaw. Mr. Bradshaw, my name is Maya Rodriguez. I'm a homeowner in the Willowbrook Heights subdivision, and I need to request an official inspection." "What's the nature of the complaint?" "HOA dispute. The board chair is threatening fines over my son's inflatable pool, and I want an official ruling on whether it actually violates any enforceable codes." Tom Bradshaw sighed in a way that suggested he'd heard this song before. "Let me guess, Karen Whitmore." "You know her." "Ladies generated more paperwork than the rest of the subdivision combined." "Yeah, I know her." Computer keys clicked in the background. "I can be out there Monday afternoon around 2. That work for you?" "Perfect, thank you." "Don't thank me yet. If the bylaws say what she claims they say, my hands might be tied. But I'll take a fair look at it. That's all I can promise." Maya ended the call and slid her phone into her pocket, watching Elijah float on his back in 18 inches of water, his face tilted toward the sun. She'd grown up without much. A single mom, 3 siblings, an apartment where the heat didn't always work in winter. She and Marcus had fought for every inch of stability they'd built, and she'd be damned if some bored suburbanite with too much time and too little empathy was going to take away her son's simple joy. Monday couldn't come fast enough. But as Maya stood there on her patio, the sun warming her shoulders and Elijah's laughter filling the air, she didn't notice Karen Whitmore standing at her bedroom window across the street, phone pressed to her ear, already making calls to ensure the inspection went exactly the way she wanted it to go. The war had just begun, and only one of them knew it. Tom Bradshaw arrived at exactly 2:03 p.m. on Monday afternoon, driving a white Ford F-150 with the city seal on the door and a ladder rack on the roof. Maya had been watching for him since 1:30, packing the living room while Elijah napped upstairs, Marcus's text messages offering moral support from the hospital. "You got this," he'd written. "Karen picked the wrong family to mess with." Maya wished she shared his confidence. Tom Bradshaw turned out to be a man in his mid-50s with a weathered face and kind eyes, wearing a polo shirt with the city logo embroidered on the chest. He carried a clipboard and a digital camera, and he smiled when Maya opened the door. "Mrs. Rodriguez." "Maya, please, thank you so much for coming." "Not a problem, part of the job." He glanced past her toward the backyard. Mind if I take a look at the alleged violation? Alleged is the right word, Maya said, leading him through the house. They stepped onto the patio, where the inflatable pool sat exactly as it had all weekend, blue, cheerful, completely non-threatening. Elijah's toy boats floated in the water, and a beach towel with cartoon characters hung over the patio chair. Tom Bradshaw walked around the pool slowly, taking photos from multiple angles. He pulled a tape measure from his belt and measured the diameter, 72 inches, exactly 6 feet. Then he crouched down and measured the water depth, 18 inches. Okay, he said, making notes on his clipboard. So we've got a portable inflatable pool, no permanent installation, no filtration system, no electrical components, water depth well below safety concern levels. Is this filled from your garden hose? Yes, sir. Takes about 20 minutes to fill, and I drain it every few days and refill it to keep the water fresh. Tom nodded, writing more notes. And the HOA board chair, Ms. Whitmore, she cited Section 7, Paragraph 3 of your bylaws. That's what she said. Something about water features over 3 feet requiring approval. Tom straightened up, tucking his pen behind his ear. Well, here's the thing. HOA bylaws don't supersede city code, and according to city code, temporary recreational water features for single-family residences don't require permits or inspections as long as they meet safety standards. Your pool meets those standards easily. Maya felt the knot in her chest begin to loosen. So I'm okay. From a city code perspective, absolutely. Now the HOA bylaws are a different animal. Those are civil contracts between homeowners. I can't tell your HOA what they can or can't enforce in their bylaws. He glanced at his notes. But I can tell you that in my professional opinion, calling this a water feature requiring architectural review is a pretty aggressive interpretation of that section. That language is typically meant for permanent installations, ponds, fountains, in-ground pools. Not kiddie pools. Can you put that in writing? Already planning on it. I'll file my inspection report with the city and send a copy to you and to the HOA board, whether they back down or not, he shrugged. That's between you and them. Thank you, Maya said, meaning it. You have no idea how much this means. Tom smiled, but it faded quickly. Listen, I probably shouldn't say this, but I've dealt with Ms. Whitmore before, multiple times. She tends to interpret the bylaws in ways that benefit her enforcement agenda. You might want to review those bylaws yourself, carefully. Sometimes the best defense is knowing the rules better than the person trying to use them against you. He handed her a business card. If you have any questions about city code versus HOA enforcement, feel free to call. I can't give legal advice, but I can clarify what's actually enforceable by law versus what's just neighborhood politics. After Tom left, Maya sat on the patio with a glass of iced tea and her laptop, pulling up the Willowbrook Heights HOA bylaws from the community website. She'd skimmed them when they'd bought the house, but she'd never really studied them. 2 hours later, her tea was warm, and her notepad was covered in annotations. Section 7, Paragraph 3 did indeed mention water features requiring approval. But Section 7, Paragraph 1 defined permanent improvements as structures or installations intended to remain in place for more than 90 consecutive days. Section 12 outlined the approval process for architectural modifications, specifically noting that temporary seasonal decorations and recreational equipment were exempt from review. Maya felt a grim satisfaction settling over her. Karen had cherry-picked the bylaw that supported her position while ignoring the context that undermined it. But as Maya kept reading, something else caught her attention. Section 8, Paragraph 5. Privacy fences exceeding 6 feet in height require board approval and must maintain sight line transparency of at least 40% above the 6-foot mark to preserve neighborhood aesthetics. Maya sat up straighter. Karen's fence was 8 feet tall, the maximum allowed, and it was solid wood planks from ground to top. No transparency whatsoever. Maya had noticed it before but never thought much about it. Everyone on the street knew Karen valued her privacy. But according to the bylaws, Karen was so fond of enforcing that fence was illegal. Unless she'd gotten approval. Maya navigated to the HOA's online portal and logged in with the password they'd been given at closing. The site was clunky and poorly designed, but it had archives of meeting minutes and approved architectural modifications going back 5 years. She searched for Karen Whitmore's address. Nothing. No application for the fence. No board approval. No variance request. Maya leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. Karen had either built the fence before joining the board. Unlikely, since Maya knew the Whitmores had only lived in the neighborhood for 4 years. Or she'd built it after joining and simply never bothered to follow the same rules she ruthlessly enforced against everyone else. Marcus came home at 7:30, exhausted from his shift, but alert the moment he saw Maya's face. "What happened?" he asked, dropping his bag by the door. "Tom Bradshaw says our pool is fine from a code perspective. He's filing a report." "That's great," Marcus pulled her into a hug. "So Karen has to back off." "Maybe, but Marcus, I found something." She showed him her laptop, walking him through the fence violation. She's been filing complaints against everyone for the tiniest infractions, but her own fence is illegal according to the bylaws. Marcus whistled low. "That's beautiful irony, but what are you going to do with it? Report her." "I don't know yet, maybe. Or maybe I just keep it as leverage in case she pushes the pool thing." "Be careful," Marcus warned. "Karen doesn't strike me as someone who takes being challenged well." He was right, of course, but Maya was done being careful. She was done being the person who kept her head down and hoped problems would go away if she just didn't make waves. Tuesday morning, she received an email from Karen Whitmore, sent from the official HOA board email address. "Dear Ms. Rodriguez, despite your request for inspection, the HOA board has reviewed the matter of the unauthorized water feature on your property and determined that it remains in violation of Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the Willowbrook Heights bylaws. Per our previous communication, you have until 5:00 p.m. Wednesday to remove the pool or face daily fines of $100. We appreciate your cooperation in maintaining our community standards. Sincerely, Karen Whitmore, HOA Board Chair." Maya read the email 3 times, her anger building with each pass. Tom Bradshaw's inspection report apparently meant nothing to Karen. The context of the bylaws meant nothing. The fact that it was a 4-year-old's toy meant nothing. She opened a reply and began typing. "Dear Ms. Whitmore, thank you for your email. I have received the city inspector's report confirming that my son's temporary recreational pool is compliant with all applicable codes and does not constitute a permanent water feature requiring HOA approval. In the interest of community transparency, I have also taken the time to review the bylaws in detail. I noticed that Section 8, Paragraph 5 requires privacy fences exceeding 6 feet in height to maintain 40% transparency above the 6-foot mark. A review of HOA records shows no approved variance for the 8-foot solid fence surrounding your property at 247 Maple Drive. I'm sure this was simply an oversight on your part. Perhaps we could both agree to a more reasonable interpretation of the bylaws that doesn't involve fines or enforcement actions for either of us. Best regards, Maya Rodriguez." She read it over once, then hit send before she could second-guess herself. The response came within 10 minutes. "You're making a mistake." That was it, 4 words, no signature, no professional courtesy. Maya showed Marcus the exchange that evening. He read both emails, then looked at his wife with something between admiration and concern. "She's going to escalate," he said. "Let her, I'm done being intimidated." "I love that about you," Marcus said, "but I'm also worried people like Karen, they don't fight fair." Maya kissed him on the cheek. "Then it's a good thing I've got the bylaws on my side." Wednesday afternoon at 4:45 p.m., Maya was playing with Elijah in the pool when she saw Karen march across the street, her face tight with fury. Maya stood up slowly, water dripping from her rolled-up jeans, and waited. "You think you're clever?" Karen hissed, stopping at the fence line that separated their yards. "Threatening me with my own fence." "I didn't threaten anyone," Maya said calmly. "I just pointed out a fact. My fence was grandfathered in before the bylaw change. It's completely legal." "Then you'll have documentation showing that. The HOA portal shows no such records." Karen's jaw worked like she was chewing glass. "You have until 5 o'clock. After that, the fines start." "Go ahead," Maya said. "Send the fine notice in writing signed by the full board. I'll see you in arbitration." "You can't afford arbitration." "We'll see." Karen stalked back across the street, and Maya's hands were shaking by the time she reached the patio. Elijah, oblivious, continued playing with his boats. At 5:47 p.m., Tom Bradshaw called her cell phone. "Mrs. Rodriguez? Tom Bradshaw. Listen, I just got a very strange call from your HOA board chair. She's demanding I change my inspection report to classify your pool as a permanent structure." Maya's stomach dropped. Can she do that? Absolutely not. My reports are based on code and professional standards, not HOA politics. But I wanted to give you a heads up that she's trying to go over my head. I've already informed my supervisor about the situation. Thank you for telling me. There's something else. When I drove past her property today to double-check some measurements for my report, I noticed something odd about her backyard. That privacy fence is blocking my view, but I could hear mechanical equipment running. Sounded like a pump or filtration system. Maya's pulse quickened. What does that mean? It means, Tom said slowly, that there might be something back there worth inspecting. If you wanted to file a formal complaint about her fence violation, I'd be obligated to conduct a full property survey, including whatever's behind that fence. Maya thanked him and ended the call, her mind spinning. She thought about Corinne's aggressive privacy, about the 8-foot fence that blocked any view into her backyard, about the mechanical sounds Tom had mentioned. And she thought about the satisfaction, no, the justice, of Corinne being held to the same standards she weaponized against everyone else. She picked up her phone and began drafting the formal complaint. This wasn't about revenge, she told herself. This was about fairness, about making sure everyone played by the same rules. By the time Marcus got home, the complaint was filed and confirmed. Tom Bradshaw would conduct the inspection Thursday afternoon. "You really did it," Marcus said, reading the confirmation email over her shoulder. "She started this," Maya replied. "I'm just finishing it." Neither of them knew that by Thursday evening, the entire neighborhood would be gathered in Corinne Whitmore's front yard, and Corinne would be nowhere to be seen. Thursday morning arrived with unseasonable heat, the kind of thick, humid air that made everything feel slower and heavier. Maya woke up with anxiety knotted in her stomach, the reality of what she'd set in motion settling over her like a weight. She'd filed an official complaint against the HOA board chair. There would be consequences either way this went. Marcus made coffee and toast, moving quietly through the kitchen while Elijah watched cartoons in the living room. He kissed Maya's forehead before heading to work, his voice low and steady. "Whatever happens today, we face it together, okay?" "Okay," she whispered, but she felt anything but okay. Tom Bradshaw had scheduled the inspection for 2:00 p.m. Maya tried to keep busy through the morning, laundry, dishes, playing trucks with Elijah, but her eyes kept drifting across the street to Corinne's house. The white colonial sat quiet and still, the perfectly manicured lawn looking like something from a magazine spread. Nothing about it suggested anything was wrong. At 1:30 p.m., Maya's phone rang. Richard Chen. "Are you home?" he asked without preamble. "Yeah, why?" "Because I just got a call from Susan Patel, who got a call from Mike Johnson. Word's gotten around about the inspection. Half the neighborhood has complaints about Corinne's enforcement, and they want to know what's really behind that fence." Maya's stomach twisted. "Richard, I didn't mean to start a witch hunt, I know what you meant, and for what it's worth, you're doing what someone should have done a year ago. That woman has made life miserable for everyone she decides is beneath her standards." He paused. "I'm just giving you a heads up. Some people might show up this afternoon, not to cause trouble, just to witness." "Witness what?" "Justice, maybe, or vindication, or just to see Corinne Whitmore finally held accountable for once." The call ended, and Maya sat on her couch feeling like she'd lit a match without realizing she was standing in a room full of gasoline. Tom Bradshaw arrived at 1:58 p.m. in his city truck, clipboard in hand. Maya watched from her window as he parked in front of Corinne's house and walked up to ring the doorbell. He waited. Rang again. Nothing. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number she left this morning. Saw her loading suitcases into her Mercedes at 7 a.m. Mike Johnson, 251 Maple. Before Maya could process that information, 2 more cars pulled up to the curb. The Patels from down the street and Mrs. Chen with her husband. Then the Johnsons in their work van. Then the Harrises from the corner house. Then more people Maya recognized from neighborhood walks but had never formally met. Within 10 minutes, there were 15 people standing on Karen Whitmore's front lawn. Tom Bradshaw looked uncomfortable but professional as he approached the growing crowd. "Folks, I appreciate your interest, but this is an official inspection. I need to ask you to wait on the sidewalk." "We're on the sidewalk," Richard Chen pointed out. He was right. The crowd had instinctively positioned themselves on the public right-of-way, not on Karen's property. Tom nodded, conceding the point, then pulled out his phone and made a call. Maya couldn't hear what he said, but his expression was grim. 5 minutes later, a police cruiser rolled up. Officer Denise Morrison stepped out, her hand resting casually on her belt but her demeanor calm. Maya had seen her around the neighborhood before. She lived 3 blocks over with her wife and their son. "Tom, what's going on?" Officer Morrison asked. "Scheduled inspection for a fence violation and possible unpermitted structure. Homeowners not answering. I've got legal authority to enter the backyard for the inspection, but given the audience, I thought it was wise to have a witness." Officer Morrison surveyed the crowd. "Anyone here planning to cause trouble?" "No, ma'am," Susan Patel said. "We just want to see what she's been hiding back there while she's been filing complaints against the rest of us for mailbox colors and garden vegetables." Officer Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly, but she just nodded. "Fair enough. Stay on the sidewalk, stay peaceful, and we won't have problems. Tom, I'll walk the perimeter with you." Maya grabbed her phone and crossed the street, joining the crowd. Richard Chen gave her a nod of solidarity. Susan Patel squeezed her arm. "Thank you for doing this," Susan whispered. Tom Bradshaw and Officer Morrison walked around the side of Karen's house, following the fence line. The 8-foot solid wood barrier loomed tall and impenetrable, and Maya realized that in 3 years of living across the street, she'd never once seen into Karen's backyard. None of them had. Tom tried the gate. Locked. He knocked, called out an announcement of city inspection, waited the required 30 seconds, then pulled out a tool from his belt and worked on the lock. It clicked open. The crowd on the sidewalk went silent. Tom pushed the gate open and stepped through, Officer Morrison right behind him. For a long moment there was nothing, just the 2 of them disappearing behind the fence, the sound of birds chirping, the hum of distant traffic. Then Tom's voice, loud and clear, "Jesus Christ." The crowd shifted, murmurs rippling through. Maya's heart hammered. Officer Morrison's voice next, sharp and official. "Tom, don't touch anything. I'm calling this in." 30 seconds later, Officer Morrison emerged from the gate, her phone pressed to her ear, speaking in rapid official tones. "Yeah, I need a supervisor at 247 Maple Drive in the Willowbrook Heights subdivision. We've got an unpermitted structure, possible health code violations, and..." She glanced back through the gate. "Yeah, this needs documentation." Tom Bradshaw came out next, his face flushed and his expression somewhere between outrage and disbelief. He looked at the crowd, then at Maya specifically. "Mrs. Rodriguez, you're going to want to see this. All of you are." The crowd moved as one unit, flowing through the gate into Karen Whitmore's backyard. What Maya saw made her stop dead in her tracks. The backyard was enormous, easily twice the size of Maya's entire lot, and it had been transformed into a private resort. There was a full-sized in-ground swimming pool, at least 20 feet long and 12 feet wide, with a tiled deck and built-in LED lighting. Beside it sat a 6-person hot tub, bubbling and steaming, with a cedar surround and built-in speakers currently playing soft jazz. A poolside bar with a granite countertop. A covered pavilion with an outdoor kitchen, complete with built-in grill, refrigerator, and pizza oven. Lounge chairs with expensive-looking cushions. A fire pit surrounded by Adirondack chairs. It was beautiful, elaborate, expensive, and completely, utterly illegal. "Holy shit," Richard Chen breathed. Tom Bradshaw was taking photos with his camera, documenting everything with the methodical precision of someone who knew this was going to end up in legal proceedings. Officer Morrison stood guard at the gate, preventing anyone from touching anything. "That pool alone is at least a $50,000 installation," Mike Johnson said. He ran a construction company and knew what he was looking at. "The hot tub's another 15 grand minimum. The pavilion and outdoor kitchen, that's custom work. 6 figures easy." "And 0 permits," Tom said, his voice hard. No architectural approval from the HOA, no building permits from the city, no electrical permits for all this wiring, no plumbing permits for the gas lines to that grill and fire pit. This is a $250,000 renovation done completely off the books. Susan Patel pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. She told me my vegetable garden was a visual blight that would lower property values. She threatened to fine me $200 if I didn't remove it. Meanwhile, she's back here with her own private country club. The crowd's murmur was growing angrier now, and Maya understood why. Every person standing in this backyard had been targeted by Karen at some point. Fines for trivial violations, threats over minor aesthetic disagreements, complaints filed with the city over Christmas lights or basketball hoops or the color of a front door. All while Karen herself was sitting behind her illegal fence, in her illegal pool, violating every bylaw and building code she'd used as weapons against her neighbors. The health code violations alone are significant, Tom was saying into his phone, apparently reporting to his supervisor. The hot tub's not properly enclosed or gated. That's a drowning hazard issue. The electrical work appears to be DIY, which is both illegal and dangerous. The pool has no safety fence separating it from the house required for any residential pool installation. And he walked closer to the pool, crouching down. Yeah, the filtration system is leaking. I can see water damage on the foundation wall. That's potential structural problems. Officer Morrison's phone rang. She answered, listened, then spoke to the crowd. Additional units are on their way, along with the building inspector and someone from the health department. I'm going to need everyone to clear the backyard and return to the sidewalk. This is now an active investigation. The crowd filed out reluctantly, but nobody left. They congregated on the sidewalk and front lawn, phones out, texting and calling others. Within another 20 minutes, there were 40 people gathered outside Karen Whitmore's house. Maya stood among them, feeling surreal and slightly sick. She'd wanted Karen held accountable for the fence. She hadn't expected to uncover a massive illegal renovation that probably violated a dozen different codes and regulations. The building inspector arrived, a woman in her 60s named Patricia Voss, who took one look at the backyard and immediately started making calls for additional specialists. The electrical inspector, a structural engineer, someone from the water department to check if the pool connection was legal. This is going to be a multi-day process, Patricia said to Tom Bradshaw, loud enough for the nearby crowd to hear. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in unpermitted work. The fines alone could be 50 grand, and that's before we even discuss bringing everything up to code or potentially having to tear some of this out. What about criminal charges? Officer Morrison asked quietly. Patricia shook her head. That's above my pay grade, but if the electrical work is as sketchy as it looks, and if someone got hurt because of it, there could be liability issues. Negligence, maybe. Depends on what the district attorney wants to do. A news van pulled up at 4:30 p.m. Maya watched in disbelief as a reporter and cameraman climbed out, apparently tipped off by someone in the crowd. Officer Morrison intercepted them at the sidewalk, and there was a heated discussion about public access and private property. This is insane, Maya said to Richard Chen. This wasn't what I wanted. Maybe not, Richard replied. But it's what needed to happen. Karen's been operating above the law for too long, using the HOA as her personal enforcement army while ignoring every rule that applied to her. You just pulled back the curtain. At 5:15 p.m., a black Mercedes SUV pulled into Karen's driveway. Karen Whitmore stepped out, her face sheet white, her hands shaking as she took in the scene. The city vehicles, the crowd, the news camera, the police presence. She looked directly at Maya across the street, and her expression wasn't anger. It was fear. Ms. Whitmore, Tom Bradshaw called out, walking toward her with his clipboard. I'm Tom Bradshaw, city building inspector. We need to talk about your property. Karen's voice was barely audible. I want my lawyer. That's your right, ma'am. But I'm legally required to inform you that we've documented multiple unpermitted structures and numerous code violations on your property. You'll be receiving formal citations within 48 hours, and some of these violations require immediate remediation to ensure safety. The news reporter pushed forward, microphone extended. Ms. Whitmore, is it true you're the HOA board chair who's been filing complaints against neighbors for minor violations while maintaining an illegal pool in your backyard? Karen pushed past the reporter without answering and fled into her house, slamming the door behind her. The crowd on the sidewalk erupted in conversation, phones buzzing with texts and calls spreading the news throughout the neighborhood and beyond. Maya stood frozen, watching it all unfold, thinking about the $20 inflatable pool in her backyard where Elijah would swim tomorrow morning, oblivious to the storm that pool had ultimately triggered. Tom Bradshaw approached her as the crowd began to disperse. "Mrs. Rodriguez, for what it's worth, you were right to file the complaint. That fence was illegal and what we found behind it. Well, that's going to keep me busy for weeks." "I feel like I just destroyed someone's life," Maya said quietly. "No," Tom said firmly. "She destroyed her own life by building all that without permits while simultaneously weaponizing the rules against everyone around her. You just refuse to be bullied. There's a difference." Marcus arrived home at 6:30 to find Maya sitting on their patio, watching Elijah splash in the pool as the evening light turned golden. "I saw the news," Marcus said, pulling up a chair beside her. "Karen's backyard is everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, the local news website. They're calling it HOA hypocrisy and the hidden hot tub scandal. I didn't mean for it to blow up like this." "I know, but Maya," he took her hand. "You stood up to a bully, and yeah, the consequences are big, but they're consequences she brought on herself. You were just trying to protect our son's pool." Maya leaned against her husband's shoulder, watching Elijah play, and tried to believe that what she'd done was right. But as the sun set over Willowbrook Heights and the lights came on in Karen Whitmore's house across the street, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. In Karen's house, behind closed curtains, Karen Whitmore sat at her kitchen table surrounded by legal documents, building permits applications, and contractor estimates totaling over $100,000 in fines and remediation costs. And in her hand, she held her phone, scrolling through the HOA bylaws, looking for any possible weapon she could still use against the woman who'd exposed her. Because Karen Whitmore wasn't done, not by a long shot. The neighborhood didn't sleep that night. Maya lay awake until well past midnight, scrolling through her phone and watching the story spiral across social media. Someone had created a hashtag, HOA Karen. The local news website had published a full article with photos of Karen's backyard, carefully avoiding identifying information, but making it clear this was a story about HOA overreach and hypocrisy. The comments section was vicious. Across the street, every light in Karen's house blazed until 3 a.m. Friday morning arrived gray and humid, threatening rain. Maya was making breakfast when her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Jennifer Estes. I'm a reporter with Channel 7 News. I'd love to get your statement about the situation with the HOA and Ms. Whitmore's property violations." "No comment," Maya said immediately and hung up. The phone rang 4 more times before she turned it off. At 9:15 a.m., there was a knock at the door. Maya opened it to find a man in an expensive suit, early 60s, with silver hair and the kind of practiced smile that lawyers spend years perfecting. "Mrs. Rodriguez, my name is Donald Berkshire. I represent the Willowbrook Heights Homeowners Association. May I come in?" "I don't think that's a good idea." "I understand this situation has become contentious," Donald said smoothly. "I'm here to offer a resolution that benefits everyone involved." Against her better judgment, Maya let him in. They sat in the living room while Elijah played with blocks on the floor, and Donald Berkshire placed a leather folder on the coffee table between them. "The HOA board has reconsidered its position regarding your pool," he began. "We recognize that the enforcement action may have been overly aggressive, and we'd like to formally withdraw the violation notice and all associated fines." "Okay," Maya said slowly. "In addition, the board would like to offer a formal apology and a 1-year waiver of your HOA dues. That's approximately $1,500. "What's the catch?" Donald's smile didn't waver. "We're asking that you withdraw your formal complaint regarding Ms. Whitmore's property and that you decline to provide statements to media outlets about this situation. We believe it's in everyone's best interest to resolve this matter privately." Maya stared at him. "You want me to pretend I didn't see what I saw?" "We want to de-escalate a situation that's become unnecessarily public. Ms. Whitmore is prepared to bring all her structures into compliance and pay whatever fines are assessed. but the negative publicity is damaging to property values for the entire neighborhood. Surely you can see that's not in anyone's interest, including your own. So Karen gets to quietly fix her illegal mansion backyard, pays some fines she can clearly afford, and everyone forgets she spent years making life miserable for people over mailbox colors and kiddie pools. Donald's smile finally cracked. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I understand you're angry." "I'm not angry. I'm offended. You're asking me to accept hush money so that Karen can buy her way out of accountability. I'm offering you $1,500 and peace of mind. Get out of my house." "Mrs. Rodriguez." "Get out." Donald Berkshire stood, closing his leather folder with deliberate care. "This offer expires at 5 p.m. today. I'd encourage you to think carefully about what's best for your family. Legal battles are expensive and exhausting, and the HOA has significant resources." After he left, Maya sat on her couch shaking with adrenaline. Marcus was at work. She was alone with Elijah, who was innocently building a tower with his blocks, and she just turned down $1,500 they could definitely use because her stubborn sense of justice wouldn't let her back down. She called Marcus. "They tried to buy me off," she said, explaining the lawyer's visit. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want to do?" "I want to tell them to go to hell." "Then that's what we do. We'll figure out the money. But Maya, if we're doing this, we need to be prepared for them to fight dirty." He was right, and Maya had no idea how dirty it was about to get. That afternoon at 2:30 p.m., a social worker from Child Protective Services arrived at Maya's door. The woman was young, maybe late 20s, with a kind face but an official clipboard. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm Amanda Foster with CPS. We received a report of potential child endangerment related to an unsupervised water feature on your property." Maya's blood ran cold. "You're kidding." "I'm required to investigate all reports, ma'am. May I see your backyard?" Maya led her through the house, her hands trembling. Elijah was napping upstairs. The inflatable pool sat in the backyard exactly as it always did, 18 inches of water, toy boats floating lazily. Amanda Foster crouched beside the pool, taking notes. She checked the depth, examined the surroundings, looked at the patio and the back door sightlines. She asked about supervision protocols, how often the water was changed, whether Elijah ever played in the pool unsupervised. "Never," Maya said firmly. "I'm always within arm's reach when he's in the water, always." Amanda made more notes, then stood. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm going to be frank with you. This report was clearly retaliatory and without merit. Your setup here is completely appropriate for a young child's supervised recreational activity. I'll be filing that this complaint is unfounded." "Who filed the report?" "I can't disclose that information, but—" Amanda glanced toward Karen's house across the street. "Let's just say I'm familiar with malicious complaints in HOA disputes. I'm sorry you were subjected to this." After Amanda left, Maya sat on her patio and cried big, ugly, angry tears. They'd called CPS on her. Someone had tried to weaponize Child Protective Services because Maya wouldn't accept hush money. She knew it was Karen. Everyone would know it was Karen. Marcus came home early, called off his remaining shift when Maya told him what happened. He found her still on the patio, staring at the pool like it was a bomb that might explode. "We're draining it," Maya said. "We're draining the pool and putting it away." "No," Marcus said firmly. "We're not. That's exactly what they want for you to back down to prove they can intimidate us into submission. We're not doing that." "They called CPS, Marcus. They accused us of endangering our son." "And CPS found nothing because there's nothing to find. We're good parents. They can't take that away from us, and they can't make us act like criminals when we've done nothing wrong." Maya wanted to believe him, but she also wanted her family safe, and she was starting to understand that Karen Whitmore was willing to go much further than anyone had anticipated. That evening, Richard Chen called. "Emergency HOA board meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. It's open to all residents. You should come." "Why?" "Because there's a motion to remove Karen from the board and elect new leadership. After everything that's come out, half the neighborhood is demanding her resignation. But Maya, she's going to be there and she's going to fight. This isn't over." Saturday morning, the Willowbrook Heights Community Center was packed. Every folding chair was filled, and people lined the walls and crowded the doorway. Maya arrived with Marcus, leaving Elijah with Marcus's mother. The energy in the room was electric and angry. Corinne Whitmore sat at the board table at the front of the room, flanked by Donald Berkshire and two other board members who looked deeply uncomfortable. Corinne looked thinner than she had a week ago, her face pale and tight, but her posture was rigid and defiant. The HOA board president, a retired accountant named Gerald Thompson, called the meeting to order with a gavel that seemed too theatrical for the moment. We're here to address concerns about recent events and a motion to restructure the board leadership. But first, Ms. Whitmore has requested an opportunity to make a statement. Corinne stood, the room went silent. I want to start by acknowledging that I made mistakes regarding the permitting and approval process for renovations to my property. I take full responsibility for those errors, and I'm in the process of rectifying them with the appropriate city departments. Someone in the back shouted, "Errors? You built a resort and hid it behind an illegal fence." Gerald banged his gavel. "Order, let her finish." Corinne's jaw tightened. "However, I want to address the characterization that I've somehow been hypocritical in my enforcement of HOA bylaws. Every action I've taken as board chair has been in accordance with our governing documents and in service of maintaining property values for this community." "Bullshit," Susan Patel said loudly. "You threatened to fine me for growing tomatoes while you had a $250,000 pool." The room erupted in agreement. Gerald banged the gavel repeatedly. Corinne raised her voice over the noise. "I'd also like to point out that this entire situation was instigated by Mrs. Rodriguez," she gestured toward Maya, "who filed a frivolous complaint in retaliation for a legitimate bylaw enforcement action. Her actions have subjected me to public humiliation, harassment, and significant financial penalties." Maya felt everyone's eyes turn toward her. Marcus squeezed her hand. "If anyone should be held accountable," Corinne continued, her voice shaking now with barely controlled emotion, "it's the person who weaponized the city inspection process to wage a personal vendetta." Richard Chen stood up. "That's rich, Corinne. You weaponized the HOA for 3 years. You filed complaints against half the people in this room for petty nonsense while you were breaking every rule you enforced against us. You don't get to play victim now." The room erupted in applause and shouts of agreement. Gerald lost control of the meeting entirely as person after person stood to share their stories of Corinne's aggressive enforcement. Fines for basketball hoops, threats over wind chimes, complaints about what types of flowers people could plant in their own yards. Donald Berkshire leaned over to whisper in Corinne's ear. She shook her head violently. Finally, Gerald managed to restore order. "We have a motion on the floor to remove Corinne Whitmore from the board and to conduct an election for new leadership within 30 days. All those in favor." Nearly every hand in the room went up. "All opposed?" Corinne's hand, Donald Berkshire's hand, and 2 other people in the back row. "The motion carries. Ms. Whitmore, effective immediately, you're removed from the HOA board. We'll be appointing an interim chair and—" "This isn't over," Corinne interrupted, standing abruptly. "I'll see you in court for defamation, for harassment, for conspiracy to damage my property values, all of you." She stormed out of the community center, Donald Berkshire scrambling to follow her. The room sat in stunned silence for a moment, then erupted into conversation. Maya felt dizzy, like she'd just witnessed something surreal and irreversible. Gerald Thompson approached her as people filed out. "Mrs. Rodriguez, on behalf of the board, or what's left of it, I want to apologize for how you were treated. The complaint against your pool was absurd, and it never should have gotten that far." "Thank you," Maya said quietly. "I also want you to know that several of us have been discussing the bylaws. They need to be updated, clarified, and reformed to prevent this kind of abuse from happening again. We'd like your input if you're willing." Maya nodded, too emotionally exhausted to commit to anything. Outside in the parking lot, Susan Patel hugged her. "Thank you for not backing down. Thank you for showing us we didn't have to live under her thumb." Over the next week, things moved quickly. Corinne hired contractors to begin the process of bringing her backyard into compliance, a process that would take months and cost over $70,000. The city issued formal fines totaling $42,000 for the unpermitted work. Corinne's lawyer sent threatening letters to Maya, Richard Chen, and 3 other neighbors, but nothing came of them. The story made the regional news. An investigative reporter did a deep dive into HOA overreach in suburban communities, using Karen's case as a primary example. The article was titled, "The Hidden Cost of Homeowners Associations, When Rule Enforcement Becomes Tyranny." Maya received letters from people all over the state sharing their own HOA horror stories. Apparently, she'd become an accidental symbol of standing up to petty bureaucratic tyranny. But the real resolution came on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after everything began, when Maya saw a "For Sale" sign go up in Karen Whitmore's front yard. Richard Chen texted her, "She's leaving. Can't say I'm surprised." Maya stood on her porch, watching the sign sway slightly in the breeze, and felt something complicated and sad. She hadn't wanted to destroy Karen's life. She just wanted her son to have his pool. But Karen had made choices, years of choices, that led to this moment. The backyard resort had been built in defiance of every rule Karen had zealously enforced against others. The malicious CPS call had been a step too far. The inability to admit wrongdoing or show any empathy had sealed her fate. Maya thought about karma, about consequences, about how the same rules we use against others eventually apply to us. That evening, she filled Elijah's pool one more time. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink, and her son splashed and laughed without any idea of the war that had been fought over this small circle of blue plastic. Marcus joined her on the patio with 2 beers, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching their child play. "You did the right thing," Marcus said eventually. "I know," Maya replied, "but it still feels messy." Justice usually is. Across the street, Karen Whitmore's house sat dark and empty, and Maya wondered if Karen would ever understand that this wasn't about revenge. It was about fairness, about refusing to accept a double standard, about protecting the small joys that make life bearable. The pool stayed, the bylaws got reformed, the neighborhood moved forward. And Maya Rodriguez learned that sometimes the right choice isn't the comfortable one, but it's still right. 3 months later, Maya stood in the Willowbrook Heights Community Center with a very different energy in the air. The folding chairs were arranged in neat rows again, but this time people chatted easily. There was coffee brewing in the back, and nobody looked like they were preparing for battle. The reformed HOA board, now consisting of Richard Chen as president, Susan Patel as treasurer, and 3 other reasonable neighbors, had called a meeting to vote on the revised bylaws. Maya had been part of the revision committee, spending 6 Wednesday evenings with 11 other residents, going through every section of the original document and asking a simple question: does this rule serve the community, or does it serve control? Karen Whitmore's house had sold in February to a young couple with twin Bobbies who'd introduced themselves to the neighborhood with homemade cookies and an open house barbecue. They'd been horrified to learn about the backyard situation. The new city inspection had added another $20,000 in required modifications before the sale could close. But they loved the location and were slowly bringing everything up to code, including replacing the illegal 8-foot fence with a proper 6-foot version with the required transparency above. Nobody knew where Karen had moved. Nobody asked. "Okay, folks, let's get started," Richard said, calling the meeting to order with significantly less drama than Gerald Thompson's gavel-banging days. "We've got the final draft of the revised bylaws. Maya, you want to walk us through the major changes?" Maya stood, nervous despite knowing this crowd was friendly. She'd never been a public speaker, but Marcus had encouraged her to take the lead on this. "You started it," he'd said. "You should help finish it right." "The biggest change is in Section 7, Maya began, pulling up the document on the projector screen. "We've completely rewritten the language about temporary versus permanent structures. Temporary recreational equipment like kiddie pools, small above-ground pools, and seasonal decorations are now explicitly exempt from architectural review as long as they meet basic safety standards." Applause rippled through the room. Elijah, sitting on Marcus's lap in the front row, clapped too without knowing why. "We've also added clear definitions for what constitutes a water feature requiring approval. Basically, anything permanently installed or exceeding 1,000 gallons capacity. A 6-foot inflatable pool holds about 200 gallons, so we're nowhere near that threshold." Mike Johnson raised his hand. "What about enforcement? How do we prevent another situation where someone abuses their position?" "Section 14 is new," Maya explained. It requires that any violation complaint be reviewed and approved by at least 3 board members before any enforcement action can be taken. No single person can unilaterally issue fines or threats, and there's a formal appeal process where homeowners can contest violations before an impartial arbiter. Susan Patel stood. We've also added protections against retaliatory complaints. If someone files a complaint against another homeowner within 30 days of receiving a complaint themselves, it triggers an automatic review by the full board to ensure it's legitimate and not retaliation. The changes went on. Clear limits on enforcement discretion, transparent processes for architectural review, elimination of subjective aesthetic standards like visual blight, and a complete overhaul of the fine structure to make penalties proportional to actual harm rather than punitive. The core principle, Richard said, is that HOA rules should protect property values and genuine safety concerns, not enforce personal preferences or create opportunities for neighbors to weaponize bylaws against each other. The vote was unanimous. The new bylaws would take effect immediately. After the meeting, as people mingled over coffee and cookies, Tom Bradshaw approached Maya. She was surprised to see him. He wasn't a resident. "Mr. Bradshaw, what brings you here?" "Tom, please, I wanted to see how things turned out." He glanced around the room. "This is remarkable, you know. Most HOA disputes end in litigation or people just giving up and moving. You actually reformed the system." "It wasn't just me. It took a lot of people being willing to do the work." "But you started it. You refused to be bullied, and you followed through even when it got ugly." Tom pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to her. "I don't know if you're interested, but the city's looking for community liaisons to help mediate HOA disputes before they escalate. You'd be perfect for it." Maya stared at the card. "I'm not a lawyer. I'm a part-time graphic designer and a full-time mom." "Which means you understand what it's like to deal with bureaucratic nonsense while trying to live your life. That's exactly the perspective we need." He smiled. "Think about it. No pressure, but I think you've got a talent for cutting through bullshit and getting to fair solutions." After he left, Marcus read the card over Maya's shoulder. "Community liaison? That's basically a professional Karen wrangler." Maya laughed. "Is that a real job?" "Apparently. Are you interested?" She thought about the last 3 months. The stress, the anxiety, the CPS visit that still made her stomach churn when she remembered it. But she also thought about the thank-you notes she'd received from neighbors who felt like they could breathe again. The young family 3 streets over who'd reached out for advice when they got threatened with fines for parking their work truck on the street. The elderly couple who'd been afraid to plant roses because they weren't on the approved landscaping list. "Maybe," Maya said. "Let me think about it." That evening, after Elijah was asleep and the house was quiet, Maya stood in her backyard looking at the empty spot where the inflatable pool used to sit. They'd put it away for the season. Spring was arriving, but it wasn't quite warm enough for swimming yet. In a few weeks, they'd bring it back out, fill it up, and watch Elijah splash and play without fear of fines or complaints or threats. Marcus joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "You know what I've been thinking about?" "What?" "How different things could have been if you just deflated the pool that first day. If you'd backed down when Karen showed up with her clipboard and her threats." Maya leaned into him. "We would have taught Eli that bullies win if you're scared enough." "Exactly. Instead, we taught him something better." "What's that?" "That standing up for what's right is hard and messy and sometimes scary, but it's still worth doing. That rules should be fair, and when they're not, you can change them. That one person refusing to accept injustice can actually make a difference." Maya turned to face her husband. "He's 4, he just knows he has a pool." "Now he does, but someday he'll understand the whole story, and he'll know his mom didn't back down." They stood together in the quiet darkness, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood settling in for the night. Dogs barking, televisions murmuring through windows, the distant sound of someone's car pulling into a driveway. Willowbrook Heights felt different now, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted that nobody had fully realized they'd been carrying. The next morning, Maya called Tom Bradshaw and told him she was interested in the community liaison position. She started the following month, part-time, working from home when Elijah was in preschool. Her first case was a dispute between neighbors over a backyard chicken coop, one side claiming property rights, the other citing noise and smell concerns. Maya listened to both sides, reviewed the bylaws, checked city ordinances, and helped them reach a compromise. The chickens could stay, but with a limit on numbers and a requirement for proper coop maintenance and cleaning schedules. Both neighbors walked away satisfied, and Maya realized she'd found something she was genuinely good at, cutting through emotion and ego to find practical solutions. Over the next year, she mediated 17 disputes. Only 2 ended up in formal arbitration. The rest were resolved through conversation, compromise, and common sense. In May, on Elijah's 5th birthday, they set up the pool in the backyard for the summer season. A dozen kids from the neighborhood came over for the party, something that would have been unthinkable a year ago, when everyone kept to themselves to avoid attracting Corinne's attention. Now, the street was full of playing children, neighbors chatting over fences, impromptu barbecues on summer evenings. Susan Patel brought her vegetable harvest to share. Mike Johnson helped Marcus build a treehouse in the backyard, approved by the new Architectural Review Committee in 48 hours with zero hassle. The elderly couple planted their roses, which bloomed in gorgeous pink and yellow sprays that everyone complimented. The new family in Corinne's old house hosted a 4th of July block party. They'd finished the backyard renovations, the pool now properly permitted and safety fenced, the hot tub removed entirely, the outdoor kitchen scaled down to something reasonable and legal. They invited the whole street, and nobody mentioned Corinne by name, but everyone understood what they were celebrating: freedom from tyranny, even the small domestic kind. Maya stood in that backyard, the same backyard that had been hidden behind an illegal fence just months before, watching Elijah chase fireflies with other kids while adults laughed and ate and enjoyed the summer evening. She thought about how strange the path had been from a $20 inflatable pool to this moment. Richard Chen raised a beer in her direction from across the yard. "To Maya Rodriguez," he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The woman who took down an empire with a kiddie pool." Everyone laughed and raised their drinks. Maya blushed but smiled, accepting the recognition even though it still felt strange. Later, as they walked home across the street, Elijah holding a sparkler and watching it fizzle, Marcus said, "You changed this whole neighborhood, you know that. I just wanted our son to have his pool. And now he does, and everyone else is freer because you stood up. That's not nothing, Maya, that's everything." Maya looked back at the house that used to belong to Corinne Whitmore, now glowing with warmth and filled with laughter, and she thought about the woman who'd built her fortress and her resort behind high walls, who'd used rules as weapons and power as protection from having to see her own hypocrisy. Maya wondered if Corinne had found peace wherever she'd moved. She hoped so, not because Corinne deserved it necessarily, but because carrying that much anger and control and fear had to be exhausting. Maybe starting over somewhere new, without the pressure of maintaining an image or enforcing dominance, had allowed Corinne to become someone different. Or maybe not. Maybe Corinne had found a new neighborhood to terrorize with mailbox regulations and architectural review boards. Either way, it wasn't Maya's problem anymore. She had her family, her home, her community, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing she'd stood up when it mattered. The inflatable pool, which had started everything, sat in their backyard waiting for tomorrow morning when Elijah would wake up and immediately ask to go swimming, and Maya would say yes without hesitation or fear. Because that's what freedom looked like. A 4-year-old splashing in 18 inches of water while his mother watched from the patio, drinking coffee and feeling grateful. Everything else, the inspections, the confrontations, the reforms, the headlines, had just been the price of protecting that simple, perfect freedom. And it had been worth every uncomfortable moment, every anxious night, every time she'd wanted to back down but chose to stand firm instead. The pool stayed, the rules changed, the neighborhood healed. And Maya Rodriguez learned that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to accept someone else's definition of what's permissible in your own backyard. Justice, in the end, looked like a happy kid and a cheap inflatable pool and the courage to say no to bullies, no matter how official their clipboard might be.